Hey guys, happy Friday. Happy Friday. Um, let's just start by saying I bought Doge stock coins. Why? I don't know. I first of all, I guess I should start by saying this is not financial advice, nor am I telling you to buy Doge coins. I understand the risks that are associated with Doge coins. I understand that I think it's like 10,000 coins are made every day or something like that. Like I totally understand all of that. I also know, and I'm going to repeat, that you should not invest money that you cannot afford to lose. Like, don't put money into stocks that you can't afford to lose, right? That's very important. Now, all of that being said, this whole Doge thing is fucking entertaining to me. And the only reason why I put money into it is so that I could say that I am part of this whole thing. And not too many people are talking about Doge right now. In fact, if you're listening to this and you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, just go on Twitter and type in DOGE and just read. And I'm noticing more like celebrities tweeting about putting money. They just bought some Dogecoin, like Doge for the people. And I'm just like, okay, I mean, this is madness, but I actually bought some more today. And once again, I didn't put money in that I, couldn't afford to lose. It was like some just like extra money that I had that I was probably going to spend on something stupid anyway. And I was like, fuck it. It's like 5 cents now, if that, per coin. I just want to be part of it just to see what happens. If it drops down to 0.002 or whatever, okay, fine. But I have spent more to be less entertained than I'm being entertained by Doge right now. So fuck it. And look, best case scenario, this whole thing does catch on and somehow they cap the production of, they limit the production of Doge and Doge becomes like as legit as Bitcoin, because there was a time when people laughed at the idea of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And there was a time when Bitcoin was worth like 15 cents or whatever. Can you imagine like 5 years from now, like the talking heads in the news are seriously talking seriously about Doge, and there's literally like a coin on MSNBC right now with that dog giving the side eye. This is like a serious news channel, and they're like, Doge is now up. Sorry, I can't even say this seriously. Doge is now up $100 a coin right now. Like, can you just imagine that? Like, and to me, that's worth the price of admission. Like, to just be sitting, I'm imagining a future version of myself right now, sitting on the couch watching something like a serious MSNBC channel. And these broadcasters are seriously taking Dogecoin seriously and talking about it. And let's just say, I don't know, something crazy. Elon Musk decides that he's going to build his own colony on fucking Mars or something, and he decides that Doge is going to be the currency, and I just happen to have some Dogecoin, and now I'm like a billionaire because it's made so much. Okay, millionaire because it's made so much. I didn't put that much in it where I would be a billionaire because it ended up being so valued, and I will have this podcast episode forever to be like, at one point in time I put some money in Doge because I thought that shit was going to be hilarious, and now I'm a billionaire or whatever. This is how my mind works. So I'm not saying you should go out and buy Doge. This is not financial advice. That's my necessary disclaimer. I'm just saying personally, I find this shit entertaining. And this thing always goes up over the weekend. It's like the stock market closes on Fridays. And so people are just sitting around in the middle of quarantine and people have nothing else better to do because everything's shut down anyway. And even if you're in a state that's not shut down, you're kind of low-key afraid to go out and socialize with other human beings because you're afraid of dying. So we're all just at home. Nobody's really going anywhere Friday. I mean, it's Friday night, but like, so where are you gonna go? Are you gonna go to a bar? Yeah, that's all closed. Are you gonna go to a club? You're gonna go to a restaurant? Yeah, everything is closed. So what else are people gonna do? And then the stock market closes, like I said, on Friday. So over the weekend, crypto is still a thing. So people just throw money on it and sit on social media and see what happens. And I want to be a part of that. So I'm now a part of Doge Army, guys. Doge Army. All right. So I ended last episode, moving on. I ended last week's episode, talking about how I was going to talk about the future. I did not pre-listen to last week's episode, like the last bit of it, to remember what I was going to say or talk about, or what I said I was going to talk about this episode. I figured I was just going to fucking wing it. But I know that it had something to do with the future. So I'm just going to take that and run with it. I started this episode obviously talking about imagining a future version of myself. And that's what I've been doing a lot of lately. It's kind of like a fun mental exercise, is really thinking about what does the future hold for us as a society, and what is awaiting us, what's waiting for us. And think about like 100 years ago, if somebody would have said to you, hey, in 100 years, right? In 1921, somebody walked up to you. So you were alive in 1921, and you probably were if you believe in reincarnation. But let's just say somebody walked up to you in 1921 and said, in 100 years, people will have cell phones, right? Where you can communicate with anybody at an instant around the world. See them, communicate with them in real time on this thing called a cell phone, right? And search for anything, listen to a podcast, listen to, a radio, watch a YouTube video, learn anything, attend university on this tiny mini monolith. I'm going to get back to why I call cell phones monoliths. But this tiny mini monolith that fits in your pocket. All of the world's information in your palm, in the palm of your hand. Somebody told you this shit. You would be like, shut the fuck up and pass me whatever it is you're smoking. Because that's how wild it is, that our present is and would have been construed to somebody 100 years from now. And I've been watching a lot of Star Trek. I'm on Star Trek Voyager now. I've just slowly been working my way up. I started with the original series. Then I moved on to the Next Generation, and now I'm on Voyager. And I'm like on season 5. So after this, I'm going to, move on to the one with the Black Commander. I don't know what that one's called, but I keep seeing memes of him, and I'm like, I want to see this guy because the memes are hilarious. But, you watch shows like this, and you think about how brilliant a man like Gene Roddenberry was and his writing staff to come up with these, sort of concepts. And they're based on science. Like, I've read enough about physics and quantum physics to know that they are definitely consulting with theoretical physicists to come up with a lot of these storylines. But after just essentially inundating my psyche with all of these shows about the future, I'm now at the point in my life where I'm really enjoying thinking about, okay, what is it going to be 100 years from now? Assuming all of the horrible prophecies don't happen, climate change destroying all of us, or comets striking in the world, or the magnetic whatever shifting and all the craziness. Just assuming that all the worst case scenarios don't happen, and we just carry on, technologically evolving. What is the future going to hold for us? And that to me is fun. So I wanted to do a podcast of that. And I encourage you guys to, imagine with me, So before we delve into that, I want to start with a few quotes that I had. There's this one quote from an episode of Star Trek. It had something to do with this guy. They had this machine, and they were able to wipe out all different civilizations and stuff like that and alter time. But one of the characters that had this machine, he said, past, present, and future, they exist as one. They breathe together. So all of what we're experiencing right now exists as one. They breathe together. More or less what he's saying, or what he was saying, is that it's all intertwined, right? There's this filmmaker on Twitter by the name of Matthew Cook, and he did this mini documentary where he basically drew a straight line from what happened at the end of the Civil War and the inaction that was taken, and the direct line to the civil rights movement, to literally what we experienced on the 6th of the storming of the Capitol. And because of the consequences that were not put into place or not enacted, essentially America is the way it is now because of the failures to act of people, in the 1800s. Like, everything has consequences, right? So the actions of people in the past are now sort of, I guess, I will say, to rephrase, the sins of the father are visited on the son, so to speak, right? It's a biblical verse. I'm not a fan of the Bible, but there's still, merit there. There's wisdom there. And that's essentially what we're seeing. What people did and didn't do in the 1800s, we are now kind of suffering the consequences of that now. And you could even stretch that back to choosing to enslave people and bringing them here and all of it, all of that. It's all intertwined. The past is tied to the present, is tied to the future. And more importantly, we are now the past of the future. I say that again. Our present is the past to those in the future. Our present is the past of those in the future. So just like the actions and inactions of people in the 1800s are now sort of influencing and have influenced, us now, what we do now or fail to do will influence the future. And what happens in the future, not even will influence, because I've said in several episodes, all of time is happening at once. I'll say it again. All of time is happening right now at once. So what we are doing now is influencing the future. And there's not just one future. There are multiple probabilities of futures. And those are my regular listeners. Like, at this point, every episode when I talk about these things, I'm building you guys up, right? I'm doing all the reading, all these books, 5 books, 5 books a week, and talking to them about talking about them to you guys, because I know you guys don't always have the time, to go, or energy to sit through and read these books. And so I'm telling you what I'm reading, but I'm telling you these things for a reason. And obviously I tell you the topics so you can go and find these books out, on your own as well, if you want to read it on your own. But, when I talk about theoretical physics and I talk about parallel realities and I talk about alternate timelines and things of that nature, I'm saying that because that's, we're building the foundation for what we're going to grow this podcast into, where we're going to really talk about things that are paradigm shifting and make you really look at reality in a different way than, what we've been programmed to look at rather. So all of time exists right now. All of time is happening right now, simultaneously, the past, present, future. And there's not just one past, just like there's not just one future. The actions that we take will shape the realities, the future realities that we will experience. All right. So everything exists as probabilities, but they're all tangible, right? It's our collective consciousness that then makes it real. If that makes sense. It makes sense. Okay. So moving on. I don't want it to get too technical because that's not the energy of this podcast today. So keep that in mind. It's all intertwined. It's all happening at once. Okay. There was a book I read called Exogenesis, Hybrid Humans by Bruce and Daniela Fenton. It's basically the, quote, scientific history of extraterrestrial genetic manipulation. I don't believe everything that the authors talked about in that book, but there are some gems in there that make you go, very interesting stuff. But a direct quote from that book is, every action we take right now and every idea we have are shaping not only ourselves, but our descendants. We'd better decide what we want humans to be like in the future. I'll say it again. Every action we take right now and every idea we have are shaping not only ourselves, but our descendants. We'd better decide what we want humans to be like in the future. That, to me, that last phrase of the sentence is powerful, is empowering. We can decide collectively and individually, we can decide what humans will be like in the future. We are deciding it right now. I would argue that we're not doing it consciously, just like I would argue that the people in the 1800s weren't thinking about how their behavior right? Their actions and their inactions. So your failure to prosecute insurrectionists and war criminal and traitors, they weren't thinking about how those actions and inactions would reverberate through time, right? And so now we have the luxury to look back and go, because they failed to do this happened, right? The civil rights movement happened, the Jim Crow laws happened, apartheid in America happened. And now we're seeing, the consequence. I'm dancing around because I don't want this episode to be political, because that's not the point of it. It's more philosophical. I want you guys to think. I really want you guys to really think, because humanity as a whole tends to be, and it's just a nature, but we can change it. We tend to be a bit myopic and short-sighted. We don't think about, okay, what are the consequences of my action? What is going to come from me doing this, right? Or just so focused on like, well, what's in it for me, or what do I want right now? Not what do I want in the future, and how do I shape my future? Which is why that phrase, we decide what we want humans to be like in the future, is very poignant. It's very strong. It's very powerful. And I want you guys to really take that to heart. How we interact with people, how we treat people, how we talk to people, what we do, the choices we make, the things that we vote for. The consequences of all of this reverberate through time, are reverberating through time. If you have kids, how you treat your kids will influence how their kids will be treated, or how they will live their life. Right? It's not just what's happening right now. We are temporal beings, and we are responsible. While we're bound in time, we are responsible to be mindful of the consequences of our actions beyond just the present time, beyond just today. Because past, present, and future exist as one. They breathe together. Powerful stuff. For me, that's powerful stuff. To me, that it's not just, okay, how am I living, right? It's not just how am I going to live my life, right? All of a sudden, you're not just some, insignificant being that doesn't matter and is going to die and fade away. Two things. One of the things that I talk about on this podcast repeatedly is reincarnation. There are plenty of books out there that have basically said that reincarnation is real. You just need to accept that reincarnation is real. Personally, I have been striving to not get reincarnated again. As my regular listeners will know, I've kind of raged against that. And I personally consider reincarnation a kind of trap. And so I am fully determined, at least right now, I'm fully determined for this to be my last incarnation. But I don't know, maybe as I get older, I might decide if I can figure out a way to maintain consciousness and remember who I was. Because to me, that's the problem with reincarnation. You don't remember who you were in your past lives. So if you don't, then you just end up re-looping the same thing. You get stuck in the same karmic trap, and then you keep coming back and coming back and coming back, right? So that's why I'm like, I don't want to be stuck in the cycle. Right? I want to move on to see what else is outside of this world. What's out there past this one, right? But assuming that we can't yet figure out a way to break out of the the reincarnation trap, then this means that when you die, unless you're immortal, which cool. Send me a message if you are, because that's cool. But I never talked to an immortal before, but at least that I know of. But sorry, I gave my side steps. But when you die, you're going to come back here, right? And you're going to come back to a future that is essentially the karmatic consequence of the actions and inactions that we underwent presently. That's also a part of karma, right? What we did and or failed to do now, what we're sowing now, your reincarnated soul will reap in the future. So it might behoove you, for example, if you are a bigot, to maybe stop being a bigot, because if you are a racist, for example, and you happen to be at the top of the totem pole right now, so to speak, like I should say, if you're a white supremacist, racist, and you happen to be right now benefiting from white supremacy, you might come back as a white person who now has to suffer the consequences of benefiting from a system of white supremacy. Does that make sense? There's a story, one of the books that I've referenced in the podcast. I can't think of the author's name right now, but I think the title of the book is called Life After Life, I believe. Anyway, it told a story about Japanese bombers who had bombed Burmese people during a war. And then they reincarnated into the children of people, of the Burmese people. Myanmar now, but Burma at the time. These Japanese fighters, I think they were called Foo Fighters, I don't know. But when they died, they were reincarnated as the children of the people that they had killed, or related to the people that they had killed, of the culture that they had attacked and killed. That's how it works. And they asked these children, some of them were born like knowing Japanese, some of them were born practicing like certain cultural things that were only natural to the Japanese people. Some of them could recall their past lives as Japanese soldiers. Like, that legit happened. These are facts, okay? And that's one of the things that I loved about that author who wrote I believe it's Life After Life. I don't want to dead air while I try to find the title of it, but I have referenced it before. I'm actually gonna dead air to find the no, it's not Life After Life, because I'm searching for it and it's not popping up. Let's see. Oh, Life Before Life by Jim B. Tucker. That's the name of the book. Okay, good. Glad I researched it. But I recommend that you go and read that, because there's a deep sigh. The reason why I just cut out, because I went to go find the title of the book and accidentally hit play on the Audible, and it kicked my shit off. So anyway, the book is called Life Before Life, and I would suggest that you read that. But what we do now, how we live now, will influence the life that we get reincarnated into. That's why you're almost doing yourself a disservice, doing your future self a disservice, to not at least look into the idea of reincarnation. People have believed in it for centuries, and not just one culture, a myriad of cultures. And so if you're living your life according to what the status quo is right now, the status quo tells you, depending on what you believe, it's either, you die and then you go to heaven if you're a super religious person, whatever heaven is, or you die and then that's it. But you can't just accept that belief as fact if you haven't at least taken the time, put in the time to check out what other cultures believe. See, the problem with European supremacy, or the idea of white supremacy, is that it's not just the racism, which that obviously clearly problematic. So it's not just the racism, it's how it affects your mindset, right? It's the idea that if it's not an ideology that has been pushed by Europeans or by white people, then it's just not true. That's dangerous because there are other cultures who also have their own scientists, who also have their own religion, who also have their own beliefs. And I'm not saying that you go and you adapt their beliefs. I'm saying consider their perspectives as well. Although the author who wrote Life Before Life, Dr. Jim B. Tucker, that is a Westerner, and why I like that book is because he actually took the time to go to these countries and also in the U.S. as well, and interview people, and he approached it using a scientific method. It was a scientific approach. Followed up on these people's claims of remembering their past lives and then documented it. So I would definitely recommend that book for sure. So assume I'm right, okay? Assuming that my premise is right, assuming that all of these other people who believed in reincarnation, all these thinkers, all these scientists, all these philosophers who also believed in reincarnation spread out throughout time and through different cultures are also right, or at least onto something, all right? Then that means that there is a version of you out there in the future, in a different, 500 years from now, living, maybe not remembering this version of yourself, this incarnated version, this incarnation of yourself in 2021, this timeline, but there is a future version of you that is alive right now. And how that plays out, how that works, I have no idea. I can only theorize, and I have certain theories, but I'm not going to go into that in this episode right now. This one more has to do with future thinking and future seeing, and future imagining, just more for the fun of it, as well as something that's thought-provoking and really makes you want to, think, food for thought, what if? So on the thinking of, so if somebody in 1921, if you asked them to imagine a cell phone, they couldn't, right? I started to think, so what would be hard for people to accept would happen in the future? Or what kind of technology would exist that if you brought it up to the average person, they would have a hard time wrapping their minds around? And the first thing I thought of was, all right, so where we're going right now is that everything that was available to basically rich people are now being offered to regular working class people. Like, for example, Uber. The idea of Uber started off as essentially it's a private car service, and private car service was something that, only wealthy people could afford. And it came in the idea of essentially a quote, chauffeur or whatever. And Uber basically turned that into and made it available to everybody. And that was their business model. Right now you have your own personal driver, or your personal chauffeur, however you want to, imagine that. And that's their business premise. Then you have food delivery services like Instacart or Amazon Now or whatever, right? Basically, it took something where it was having a personal shopper, and that was something that was only available to, the wealthy, and then they made it, available to everybody else. So now you can order groceries, just pay somebody, tip them and pay a fee, and they'll shop for you. It's a personal shopper, and they deliver the food to you. So that was something that was once available to the wealthy, and now the business model is you make that available to, the average Joe. Right? What else? Oh, I just noticed on Audible, when you go to return a book, they have changed their customer service label, and they've changed it to a concierge. So now they call it Audible concierge, right? So it's all fancy, right? And a concierge used to be something that is offered at a high-end hotel. And so they're taking the idea of something that's high-end, and then they're applying it to, I'm calling in I want to return this book. And this person introduces themselves as, oh, I'm your concierge for the evening or whatever. So you're taking something that was once marketed to just the wealthy, and you're opening it up for everybody. And then that's the business model. So then I started to think, okay, so let's start imagining what the future is. Right now, everybody has a car. Well, most people have a car or access to some kind of vehicle. But 100 years ago, right, the idea of having your own personal car, because, it was a new technology and things like that, was only something that was available to the wealthy. Even cell phones, being able to FaceTime people. There was a time, it was a very short moment in time, but I do remember this, and I've referenced this in past episodes, where this one company, and I wonder whatever happened to them, but they came out with a phone. It was a landline, and you could call and see somebody on the screen. And the whole idea was like, oh my God, like I could call somebody and see them. And I think this was like around 2000s or something like that. And that concept in itself was mind blowing. Like being able to see somebody you're talking to on the phone. And then like right after that, they came out with smartphones, and I'm sure that business went out of business. It's awful. But, at the time it was brilliant and mind blowing. Right. And it was also very expensive. And the other person also had to have the same phone for it to work, and the phone was expensive. So, but future, right? At that time, it was like, wow, like, can you imagine being able to see somebody so far away? And now it's so commonplace, like we take it for granted. Like I was talking to my cousin, he's in England, and like he was calling on his laptop. So it was like older laptop. So it was kind of like staticky. And I remember saying something like I was annoyed. Like I was like, oh, can you fix your phone, please? Or fix your laptop, please? Like I keep hearing the static. And then I checked myself because I was like, wait, that's fucking stupid. Like I'm being an idiot. Like the fact that I could talk to you, you're in another time zone. Technically, he's even in the future because I'm in California. He's in London. Like they're like 8 hours ahead or something crazy like that. And I'm complaining because like there's a little static as I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody who's like clean across the world, like in another continent. Like the shit we take for granted is just mind blowing. Like imagine what people 50 years ago, even not even like I'm saying 100 years ago, 50 years ago. Imagine what people 50 years ago would think about the stuff that we have access to now, the technology that we have access to now. Mind blowing. So I kind of want to think like, okay, what if everything goes according to plan in sense of like we don't destroy ourselves and the planet, and we just keep hopefully evolving technologically and psychologically as well, hopefully. What is the future going to look like? And then I thought, okay, well, essentially what's going to end up happening, unfortunately, is that right now, what do rich people have? They have access to private jets, and private jets are very expensive. But if we're extrapolating that what used to be offered to the rich is now being offered to, average everyday people, then eventually what's going to end up happening is that flying cars are going to become commonplace. And then we'll look up and see, and there's going to be a lot of like light pollution and stuff like that. So that's a downside, right? That to me, I'm like, oh, I'm going to miss looking out in the sky and not seeing, a bunch of planes and stuff, flying cars in the air. But I feel like that's where we're heading towards, right? It's flying cars. Like it's almost inevitable. Like they're trying to now push like drone deliveries and stuff like that, which I'm like, can they not though? Like, I don't know how much faster you want shit to be delivered to you. I know they're trying to cut out having to pay human beings to deliver stuff, but I like looking up and not seeing a bunch of drones flying in the air or whatever, you know what I mean? But you can make the argument that, there was a time before we had highways and stuff like that and roads that, the people who were pushing for, okay, let's build roads and turn everything into, pavements and sidewalks and highways, or saying, okay, well, this is just the price of progress. We have to cut through these trees and, put cement over everything. And I'm sure that there were people who said, okay, well, I don't want to look at a bunch of gravel and cement and, street lights. Like I want nature. And I'm sure that the people who wanted highways, their argument was, well, this is just the costs of progress. So I'm sure that's going to be something that we were going to have to grapple with. So, but I'm thinking that that's something that's going to be the next thing. Okay, we're moving from, oil-powered cars to now, probably 10 years from now, most of the cars are going to be electric cars, and what that looks like. And then after that, probably solar-powered cars and what that looks like. And then after that, too, you're going to have flying cars or hovercrafts or whatever it is. And then I was like, okay, but let's throw ourselves like 100 years into the future, 200 years into the future. And let's say that what they're working with at CERN right now is, like trying to find black holes because, trying to travel through space or trying to create black holes or trying to create wormholes. Like eventually someone's going to have an accident and they're going to discover how to make a wormhole. And then that becomes the next thing. And perhaps we just skip the whole flying cars thing, which I actually like that idea better. And instead of like, okay, I'm going to fly to London, in my private jet that goes like super fast, you know what I mean? Like, so it's not like a long flight anymore. That's what I'm saying. That's where I'm getting at too, that these planes are going to go super fast. Eventually, everyone's just going to have their own wormhole, but it's not going to just go to everybody having their own wormhole. Like everything is like progress, right? So then airports aren't going to be, you're getting on a plane to fly somewhere anymore. Airports are going to be like, you're going to go to the airport and walk through a wormhole. Like, think about that. Like, I'm sorry, I'm nerding out, but the idea of that is so wild to me. Like right now I'm in California. Okay. So imagine in the future, once they've discovered how to like make their own wormhole and they've, proven to make it safe and everything like that. I want to go to London now. Okay. So you go through the airport, go through security, do your thing or whatever. And then you just walk through the wormhole and on the other side, you're now in England. Like, isn't that crazy? That's wild to me. And it's wild to me, but I know that it's possible. We don't have the technology now, but traveling through wormholes is not an impossibility. Neither is creating wormholes. It's just we haven't reached there yet. We're not there yet technologically, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen in the future. And that's crazy to me. I think just even thinking about the fact that at some point one day, they're going to figure out a way to make planes faster than they are right now. Like something's going to happen somewhere, and a flight to, even without wormholes, even without that, like eventually what's the next step is, okay, we've got planes now. How do we make them faster? All right. And so there's going to come a time, and I may or may not live to see that, but if reincarnation is a thing, then a version of me will experience that, where I go, okay, I'm in California. I want to go see, the Eiffel Tower. Let me just book a trip. And then you go to this airport or whatever it's going to teleport. There you go. Whatever it's going to be called. And then you go through security and then you walk through, and now like, boom, you're in another side of the world. In an instant, you're not sitting on a plane or whatever it is. You're just, boom, now you're in no jet lag. Maybe you do have jet lag. I don't know. I guess, would you have jet lag? I don't know. But like, that is wild to me. That is fun to think about. Like, and I encourage you to think about that. And of course, then the next step is, okay, now another 100 years from now, they found a way to take it from, okay, you go to the airport and get on a commercial wormhole, and now it's a private wormhole, and now you can, take a wormhole directly to like the hotel that you want to go stay in. Like it's like a 5-star hotel or whatever it is. And then of course the step after that is now everybody will just have a wormhole in their house. So then distance is no longer a thing, right? Like if you want to go see your mom, you can literally just like push a button, call her on, FaceTime. Okay, mom, I'm stopping by. And then boom, you teleport to go see them. When you're done, you teleport back, using a wormhole, whatever, teleport back home. Now you can literally, the world is your freaking oyster, and you can live anywhere in the world. Distance is not an issue. If you decide, okay, I'm going to go live in Australia, right? Long distance relationships, like, okay, that works. Like, you don't have to FaceTime them and say, all right, well, I know you have to go take that job in like New Zealand, but I'm going to have to stay in New York. All of that is gone. Like, you don't have to, you can work in New Zealand, hop in your wormhole, go do your job, finish your job, take the wormhole back, and be home by dinner. Like, that's the future. That's the future that's waiting for us. And that's wild to me. And I'm excited. And part of me is like, do I want to not reincarnate? Do I want to experience this? Because that's cool. Like, I get excited thinking about stuff like that. What else? Well, I mean, obviously, eventually we will figure out a cure for cancer. Eventually we'll figure out a cure for a lot of the diseases that have plagued, mankind right now, which it's nice, television becomes different. I've hinted at this. In fact, I have a whole podcast on this about how this is what we're living in right now, a simulation, but what's the progress, right? So we went from, think about the progress, the evolution of entertainment, the evolution of television, right? It first started off as artists would draw on the wall, on the cave. That's entertainment. Think about it. So they would draw on caves, and then it became telling stories around the fire. And then that became plays, right? Shakespeare and that. And then it turned into silent movies. Then it turned into proper movies, black and white movies. Then it was color. Then it was 3D. Then it was augmented reality and CGI. And now we're seeing like simulation. So what's the next step, right? 100 years from now, you're not going to sit on a couch and watch your favorite characters. You're going to put something on your head, take a pill, suspend disbelief, and go into this simulation where you become like Luther, you become Iron Man, you become, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm trying to think about it, but whatever your favorite character, TV, Jean-Luc Picard, you're now in Star Trek. You're now on the Voyager. You're going through all of this, and while you're watching it, and you are these characters, and of course, when it's all said and done, you unplug, and then you go to, you hop in your wormhole and go do your job and come back. Like, think about everything. It's not just going to carry on like this, Like, the future, well, there's myriad of different futures. This depends on how we live now, but the future is going to be wild. And to me, I'm not even extrapolating anything that's like too far out there, because they are, like, physicists are looking for ways to make wormholes. They're not doing that for no reason, right? And we do have, virtual reality games. Like, that's going to evolve also, right? And then, of course, you have the regular, idea. So now you have Siri is your phone, but eventually Siri is going to be turned into a robot. There's a robot company, I think, in Boston called Boston Dynamics. I believe that's them. And the last video I've seen of them, like, they have their robots, like, able to dance now. Like, that's a thing. So now it's like, okay, you're going to have a robot that's like, you could FaceTime, your mom or your dad and like talk to them, but it's not on a tiny screen anymore. Now it's going to be on a robot that kind of can walk with you and talk with you. Like, that's so cool. I'm such a nerd. I'm sorry. But it's just, I live so far away from my family and everything like that. But imagine like 20 years from now, hopefully they're still alive. Let's say 10 years, because they're in their 60s. 10 years from now, I get a robot, an Apple robot, and then I get one from my mom. And she powers it on, and it's like a full-blown robot. Like, it's made, like a body, like it's 6 feet tall, but it's got a blank screen. And all I have to do if I want to call her, it's not this little screen where she's holding it, right? It now projects onto the the face of the robot, and then it can just walk with her and talk to her. And like, instead of her holding the screen, the robot will just follow her, around and help her with things and stuff like that, And then, as they get older, like, the robot can do her dishes, like, it's not hard doing the dishes. It just goes in and pick up. Or you could even make it where you can sorry. You can control. I love this stuff. But imagine you could take the robot now, like, okay, my mom needs help, but I'm here. I can't help her. But I've got this Apple robot that I got for her, and she needs help doing the dishes. Okay, Mom, I'll do your dishes. And I just pick up the joysticks, right? Or it's not even joysticks, because I'm not even thinking gloves. And now I put on like this visor, or this helmet or whatever, and I can see what the robot sees. And then I go in, and I pick up the dish, pick up the brush, and I'm like washing her dishes. But the robot is doing it for me, right? But I'm controlling it. Like, imagine that. Or take that a step further. Now, that same robot, like, they need to move the couch or something like that, or move a table. It just picks up, you wear the gloves, and then the thing just walks up to the couch and picks up the couch and turns it this way. You control everything. Like, that's coming, guys. That's coming. Like, that's cool. That's cool, and that's fun. Like, everybody's just got their own personal robot, just kind of following them around or whatever. So that's fun. Another, I have to come back to that, because that's actually, like, what could you do with that? Like, okay, so I can help my mom wash her dishes. She needs me to do her laundry. Okay, I'll have the robot do it or whatever. As long as you're controlling it and you see it, you could do that. Seems kind of inefficient. They got to work on that. I guess eventually you can, maybe they'll make the robot smart enough where it can do it without the person actually doing it. Or she can do her own dishes, but the robot's the one doing it, and she's just doing the movements while she's like, laying on the couch or something like that, relaxing. I don't know. I did a tweet today about, I'll read it. What did I say? I said, in the future, did I take a picture of it? Yeah, I said, in the future, time travel is now commonplace. Retro tourism is booming. That eerie feeling you get of being watched in the middle of the night, that's just your great-great-great-grandkids watching you sleep. Occasionally, one of them hides your keys just to watch you freak out. So I tweeted that today. And it's like, on one end, if I hadn't spent all this time reading about what is possible in physics, I wouldn't be able to make that kind of statement, but it's coming. It has already happened. Scientists somewhere have cracked time travel. And as a result, right now, in your room, look around. That feeling you get that somebody is watching you, even though you are alone in your home right now, that feeling is not a wrong feeling. That is your great-great-great-great-great-grandchild observing you. Yeah, they're watching you pick your nose right now. Yeah, they just, I said retro tourism. That'd be a great show. I would watch that. Retro tourism is a thing, right? So now everybody not only has their own wormhole, they also have their own time travel event. Because what's the one thing that drives human behavior, right? Boredom. We're all easily bored. And the more these sort of technologies kind of progress, the more we're like, okay, what else is there? What else is there? So eventually, when, they're in the future, eventually what's going to happen in the future is, like, universal basic income is going to be a thing. Everybody's going to be using Doge. Yeah. So you don't have to work if you don't want to. Maybe what they chronicled in Star Trek is a thing where instead of you having to, buy groceries or something like that, everybody just has a replicator, and you could just replicate your meal. And you just say, computer, make me some ice cream. Some computer, make me some tea or whatever. And it's just replicated food, right? So then you don't have to do that. And every person that's born gets housing, right? And, it's, if you don't like the basic, average housing, then you can obviously go get a job and work harder, or just work, I guess, to get like a bigger home or whatever it is that suits you. Or you could just be entertained. I don't know. Obviously the future will have their problems. But I think that's going to be a thing. And then, with time travel now being a thing, instead of taking trips to different places, like part of what makes vacations so alluring is that, it's like you're going off to this distant place. But if everybody's got a super fast jet, it's not that far anymore, And if everybody's got, like, let's say, their access to a wormhole and you're hopping somewhere and experiencing it, all of a sudden things that used to take forever to do take less and less time. And with things taking less and less time, you're going to have more and more free time. And so there's going to be a need to fill that free time. Also, in this future, obviously, they're going to eventually eradicate sickness and disease. There's a root cause of disease, it's inflammation. They can figure out how to sort it. And we're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost at the point, and by almost, I mean like 100 years. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but it's right around the corner where we do eradicate sickness, disease, poverty. That's the future that I want to experience. And I don't believe anything is impossible at all. I mean, I think we've lived long enough. Look around to just see. Like, I don't think anything is impossible. So to me, it's not hard to imagine a future where people aren't hungry on the streets, where people aren't, homeless. You know what I mean? Where mental health isn't adequately treated. Right? You go to the doctor, they do a scan, they find out what's wrong with you, they give you something, problem solved. Maybe it's a synthesized magic mushrooms, whatever, LSD. Whatever it is, but it changes, the chemical imbalances of people's minds. And now, people are well functioning. We have moved past racism because the whole concept of racism is fucking stupid. So we've evolved past the stupidity of thinking that you are superior to somebody because you lack melanin. Like, the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We've moved past that. Because we're not idiots anymore. So what's next? Okay, well, things take less time. You're going to have more free time. So how are you going to fill the free time? Well, time travel. Now you could travel back and, observe people in the past anytime. And I would argue to go as far as maybe you can go back in time and not just observe, like, become a person in the past. I'm sorry. I would bet money that people like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, these guys are like, they've got to be time travelers. I'm sorry. Like, they've got to be. And it wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to argue that maybe with time travel, maybe physically you won't be able to travel your physical form, like say 100 years from now, right? 21, right? You won't be able to just, okay, I'm going to hop in this machine and, transfer my body to 2021. But what's to say that you won't be able to upload your consciousness, transfer your consciousness to like an entity, it's like a form that exists now. Or to a body that exists now, whatever that looks like, right? Maybe they have it where you can either just kind of apparate and watch non-corporally, which is why you're not able to see these entities. You can just feel them. Like, you just know that there's somebody watching you, but you can't. It's just a feeling, right? Like that feeling when somebody's looking at you and you turn and there's nobody there, but maybe there is somebody there. It's just it's a human being. I'm not trying to say that they're not human beings. I'm saying that in the future, 100 years from now, we have as a society detached from the whole obsession with materialism. And we realize that the body is really just this vehicle and that a person is more than the body, that the person really is their consciousness. And they figured out a way to sort of transfer consciousness, from body to body or from form to form. That's another thing, but also through time. So like, let's say future version of myself, I have now reincarnated to, the year 2121, and everything is perfect, right? Oh, and then, but in this time, in this future, another thing that has now existed is that they have now figured out a way, they will figure out a way where you can track your past lives, right? So then you go to it's not a therapist anymore to give you drugs because, well, you don't need medication, you don't need drugs or whatever. Like it's a one-off thing. You go to a doctor, they say, okay, you've got whatever mental, health issue. They give you a prescription. You take it just the one time because we've moved past capitalism and the need to hoard fucking money. So there's no need to just keep people on pills in perpetuity. And so you just take the pill one time and now you're healed. And now it's like, okay, so you go to the psychiatrist, and what they do instead is like they put you through this machine, and it connects it doesn't try to track your physical memories of like your form now in your brain, but it actually tries to the machine actually tracks your conscious memories. And so in this machine, you put this helmet on and it's connected. And I'm imagining the future in case you're like, wait, what the fuck is she talking about? I'm saying this is a future that I want to experience, and we are probably going to experience. Thank you for following along. I always feel like when I go on these tandems, like that one guy from Pacific Rim that's like the scientist, and he has all these charts like taped to the wall, and everybody's like, okay, I know what he's saying makes sense, but he sounds fucking crazy. Stay with me. Okay, so you go to the psychiatrist, they give you medicine, and now you're better. You go in there and you're like, I feel depressed, and they're like, boom, here's your medication. Okay, I'm no longer depressed. But instead now it's like you go to a psychiatrist and you want to do a past life regression. So you go in, there's this machine, and it scans your consciousness for all the imprints of your past selves. And it prints out this piece of paper, and it shows you who you were in each century, right? Who you were in the 1100s, who you were in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1900s, or whatever, however long. And then you go through another machine, and you can literally now travel through time to your past incarnations, and then either take control of the body of yourself or kind of nudge your past selves and basically become your own like intuition, essentially. So your past self will have feelings of like, oh, I should do this or I shouldn't do that. And to your past self, it's going to feel like, oh, I have intuition or I'm psychic. But it's really your future self that is now sort of influencing your past self, right? Through time, through this machine in the future. I have my hands up right now, like, ta-da. Like, it's not far-fetched. It's not as crazy as it sounds, okay? There's a book called, is it Resurgence? I don't remember right now, and I'm afraid to try to search for it because every time I try to look through Audible, I accidentally hit play and then it cuts my shit off. Let's see. It's a fictional book. I've talked about it before. Come on. Recursion. Ha! By Blake Crouch. Read that. That's another really good book. I don't read a lot of fiction at all, actually, but it's one of my favorite fictional books. And it talks about something to this effect. Not quite, though. What I'm talking about is different. But he talked about essentially a person traveling along their own, traveling back in time through their own brain and then changing the past in different ways. But in their own lifetime. What I'm talking about is going back through different lifetimes. Hey, if you're listening to this, by the way, and you are like a writer or something, find me on Twitter, Jolie Artist, and reach out to me and let's write something. Because I want to see this produced, because I want people talking about this, these kind of things. I want to see this produced on like TV or something like that, or a movie or something like that. Because that would be, or a series, like that would be dope. Like, I want you guys to think. I want you guys to imagine. It's so invigorating, like bucking the system, so to speak, bucking the status quo, because at least personally for me, I was always programmed just to see reality in this one way, right? It's either one. Like as a child, I was raised, as a Christian. So it's like, oh, you die and you go to heaven. And heaven is a place where you play fucking harps all day and praise God, which who wants to do that for all eternity, right? And all of the sinners are actually not there, right? They're all burning in hell. So then what, you're just going to be in heaven with a bunch of judgmental assholes who never did anything wrong? Like, that's not fun. Like, I'm trying to hang out with the people who were like, this is bullshit, fuck that. But apparently they're all going to be burning in hell. So I threw that out. I don't believe in that. The opposite, of course, is, Darwinism or, atheism, extreme atheism, which is basically you're an insignificant nothing. You were born, by accident. You die and then you just rot in the ground. And who you are is just, an accident of fate, so to speak. And it's confounded, it's confined in the brain. And once you die, that's it. Well, that's fucking stupid. Like, I don't want to believe that either. I don't believe that. So for the last few years of my life, have been spent trying to find, okay, what do other cultures believe, right? Because like I said earlier, part of the problem with white supremacy, it's not just the racism. It's the idea, it's the ideology that just, if a European says it, if a white person says it, it's true. And if a person of color or of a different culture that's not European says something different, they're wrong, right? The story of Noah, for example, is based on the Middle Eastern epic of Gilgamesh, right? And the epic of Gilgamesh was written by the Sumerians thousands of years before the idea of Noah even was written down. It was a stolen story. A lot of the Bible stories in the Bible are stolen from other cultures, from the Egyptians, from the Sumerians, all of that. And yet, Babylonians, if you ask a Christian about Babylon and the Babylonians, they'll immediately tell you, oh, those people are demonic. They're evil. They worship Satan. Like, okay. But you do realize that the Christian religion is a Middle Eastern religion, right? And, okay, now I'm going to go into that, right? But that's white supremacy. It's not just, white supremacy isn't just this person thinks, okay, this white person thinks that they're superior to you because of the color of their skin. White supremacy affects everybody. It's basically, it feeds into the denigration of your own culture, if you're a person of color, and your own gods and your own beliefs and your own religion and your own scientists and your own country's achievements, putting them below the achievements and the accomplishments of Europeans and of whites. That's a problem, right? So part of how you fight white supremacy is expanding your mind and thinking outside the box and really checking out other beliefs. And I'm not saying you believe everything. I'm saying that there are other things out there and you consider them, you take them into your mind, and then you take it in as food for thought. And that's been my approach. And that's why I read a lot of the books that I read. Some of them are a little bit unconventional in what the authors talk about. And it's okay. It's something that says, okay, it's different. There are a lot of writers who have said that, for example, the theory of evolution is wrong, and it's based on Francis Crick himself, one of the guys who discovered the double helix, who discovered the DNA. He said that because of the way DNA is, it's been unchanged for forever. He doesn't believe the DNA actually occurred on this planet naturally. And so he believes in panspermia, that aliens or whatever brought DNA here. And some people have piggybacked off that idea and have extrapolated from that to say, okay, well, perhaps aliens escaping from their world came to this world and turned Earth into a kind of library, and then genetically engineered the life forms here on this planet, and seeded it with their DNA to kind of form what we are now, which is a sort of hybrid of, these aliens, right? Which would, in a way, make sense, because a lot of human beings all kind of report this like innate feeling of not necessarily feeling like we're from here. I mean, I feel that way, and I know a lot of people do, who feel like I'm not really from here. Like I feel like I'm from somewhere else, And some people have made the argument that these entities are still with us now, kind of watching everything. Which is why the idea of somebody developing an ability, and yes, it's impossible for us now, but it may not always be, developing some sort of technology to allow a person to accurately regress back to past incarnations, right? Precisely. And learn how they died and how they lived. And I'm saying take it a step further and actually go back and either full on like inhabit that body again and then move throughout that time period, or nudge that person's, life by being their intuition, so to speak, and help them make different choices so that your future outcome, right, the future incarnation is different, right? That's wild. Like, honestly, like imagine this sort of concept, which is like, okay, not just past life regressions, but you can literally go back and change your entire like karmic life. So imagine like 400 years from now, 500 years from 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years from now, okay? Where everything that I mentioned is now a thing, okay? Everybody gets a house, everybody gets a car. You don't have to work if you don't want to. All the sickness is gone, illness is gone. You can replicate your food. So all of those, like the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs have been met. And the next step is, okay, what do you do? Okay, so we have tried simulation hypothesis, but in real time, where you could just, instead of watching TV to become entertained, or to be entertained, you put on a helmet and you live like your favorite character on a TV show or a movie, right? Which I've argued is what we're doing now in this reality. But what happens after you take the helmet off of this simulation? Well, if this world really is a simulation, if this world really is a simulation that has been created by an advanced society that's doing a sort of retro ancestral simulation, which is what we're living right now, my argument is that won't be the only form of entertainment, this world, right? This simulation. There would be others. So what I'm saying is, okay, let's think, what other forms of entertainment would there be? And I say entertainment with quotes, because anything could be considered entertainment. I started this podcast talking about I bought Doge for the entertainment value, okay? So bear that in mind. At the end of it, at the core of it all, humanity is constantly seeking to avail itself of boredom. We're restless beings. So what other technology would exist? Well, you could, like I said, and I'm going to keep saying it, is, there might be technology where you put on your helmet and you can travel back in time through your past incarnations and literally change your timeline. So I remember earlier I mentioned the Japanese bombers who were reincarnated as Burmese children, right? So now imagine I'm a Japanese bomber and I go off to war and I'm told I've got to bomb this village, this Myanmar village, this Burmese village. And I, instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do, now that I'm aware that, okay, I'm not just going to die, I'm going to come back as as children of people who survived my attack. And I'm going to suffer the consequences of my attack. I make a different choice and go, you know what, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm sorry, right? And the reason why I make a different choice is because a future incarnation of myself is now retroactively influencing my behavior now. And so now instead of me coming back as, a Burmese child, I end up reincarnating as something else or someone else, right? I reincarnate again as as a Chinese person, or I reincarnate as, literally anything else, but it's not as a result of a karmic action, right? It's a different thing. Well, what happens is when you change the past like that, you in the future will become a different incarnation. And so I just now have I just imagine myself in the future with this mask helmet thing on, morphing into a different physical incarnation, right? So, sorry if this is confusing. I hope it's not, but I'm trying my best to explain it as clearly as I can. So, I'm this Japanese bomber, but I am also in the future. I'm a white dude in the future. Okay. And I go to the psychologist and he puts on this helmet that allows me to retroactively affect my past. So I put on this mask and go back to my incarnation, my past incarnation as a Japanese bomber, that led to me being a white male. Okay. But let's say I'm bored just because it's entertainment. I don't want to be a white male anymore. I don't want to incarnate as a white male. Right. So what they would do in this future reality is you put the helmet on, you go back, you change one action. And by changing one action, it changes your path of incarnation. So now you change from reincarnating to a Burmese child to now you're an Indian woman, right? And then in the future, the version of myself that reincarnated into a white male, I start changing. Now I'm a black female. Right, so my body changes, and so that's how people sort of alter themselves without physically having to actually have surgery or whatever. That's wild to think about, but I want you guys to think about that because that is something that is very probable, and also a show that I would pay money to watch. I want to write this stuff. I just don't really have the time. But I guess now that I've said it, I probably should write it and maybe pitch it because that's cool. Yeah. So I know that something to think about. Yeah, something to think about. I know that we are sort of programmed to just be stuck. And I think that's why a lot of people also struggle with suicide and struggle with depression or whatever because of what the prevailing mindset is and the limitations of our present time period. You're told this is all there is. Right? Or so it's either one or another. You choose to believe, okay, I die and I go to heaven, which that's not true, or you die and that's it, right? And I'm challenging you to think beyond the present. Think about what's possible. I've talked about wormholes. I've talked about time travel. I've talked about robots. I've talked about entertainment. And these things, these ideas bring me hope. These ideas are encouraging. These ideas are fun to think about, to talk about. Everybody wants to talk about the weather when I hate fucking small talk. Like, shut up. It's like watching a movie and let's talk about the plant in the background. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, look, that's interesting that there's a taxi cab in the left corner. Like, no, this world is so intricate. I'm telling you, it's more intricate than we have been led to believe. It's more involved than we have been led to believe. There are some books out there that I've just been reading. And like I said, it's not that I believe everything that's said, about ESP or telekinesis or out-of-body experiences or whatever. But a lot of the people who provide these, arguments the arguments are compelling. And so I encourage you to check out, a lot of these books that I mentioned. I'm not saying you go in and you read everything and you go, okay, now I totally believe that X, Y, and Z. But I don't think it's far-fetched to, for example, think that extraterrestrials are walking amongst us right now. If you think that extraterrestrials are limited to little green men, then yeah, it does sound ridiculous. But if you follow a logical train of thought and you understand that technology is going to evolve and progress, and you understand that eventually we're going to discover things that we could only sort of imagine right now, then it's not that far-fetched to say that there is a future version of humanity where we have tackled time travel, where we have found a way to generate wormholes to the point where it's probably going to be commonplace and taken for as much for granted as I take me calling my cousin who is in another time zone and on another continent and having a little static in the background. And if you can imagine that said, quote, extraterrestrials aren't actually little green men, but might very well be humans of the future that have come back through time and either observed us non-corporally, and corp meaning body, corpse, right? So non-corporally, without bodies, right? Just observed us, or transferred, traveled through incarnations, bearing in mind that your consciousness is immortal. It doesn't die, right? Think of your consciousness as data on your phone that's backed up to the iCloud. If I destroy my phone, so long as I've backed it up, the data that I backed, you can't touch data. It's intangible. Just like you can't touch consciousness. It's intangible. And my argument here is that consciousness is intangible, right? It's not found in your brain, just like the information that you have in your cell phone isn't just stored on the phone. It's also backed up to your cloud, to a cloud server. So what I'm saying is that it's not hard to imagine that you, as consciousness, have always sort of existed as this non-corporeal thing that has and can transfer from one form to another form, to another form, to another form, just like you've transferred your data from one iPhone to another iPhone, to an Android, back to an iPhone, or whatever, right? Same concept. And I encourage you guys to think about that, because I think that by doing so, we start taking a broader view of this world, right? Having a better understanding of this world, not just accepting things at face value. I think that if you encourage yourself to understand that if reincarnation really is a thing, you're going to get reincarnated back here, you might be more thoughtful the next time you go to throw something in the trash that maybe you should be recycling. Or, you know what I mean? Like, if Earth is a closed system and your soul, your consciousness doesn't die with your body, then essentially you're going to be your own descendant. And then you are going to be the one that either profits from or suffers from the consequences of the things that you're doing and we are doing now in the present time. Right? To me, to be short-sighted and not think about consequences of your actions or just imagine a future beyond just now, and not imagining a future by worrying about it or being fearful, but actually creating a positive future of what you want to see and being more active. I think that these things are important. We're too passive. There's a lot more passive people shaping the way our society as a whole is heading towards. And unfortunately, by doing nothing, or by sort of taking a passive approach of, okay, well, whatever's going to be will be, in a sense, makes it so that reality, sort of is kind of whatever it is, a very small minority of people who happen to be driving it want it to be. Okay, and I'm saying, like, get up, wake up, create what you want to see, create the reality that you want to experience. Live your life in a way that what you do now, when you die and you come back, you're not suffering some sort of fucked up karmic consequence of your actions. Now, I'm not saying to be afraid or feel guilty or judgmental. I'm saying you don't die. We don't die. I don't know how else to say that. I've said this so many times, and I haven't come to that conclusion lightly. I've come to that conclusion by reading a lot, and not on the same topic across the board. And they're all basically saying the same thing, that life is cyclical. Right? So you have reincarnation, Eastern philosophy. You have the big bounce theory, that's science. You have seasons, that's nature. It all cycles, it all repeats. So what I'm saying is, live like that. Don't be so confounded and bound by time and form right now. Past, present, future all exist together, are all intertwined, all breathing. They breathe as one, they move as one. Oh shit, I was going to mention the monolith. Okay, real quick. So in 2001, A Space Odyssey, there was a scene where there was a machine called a monolith, and the monoliths are built by an unseen extraterrestrial species. In the series and in the film, there are 3 monoliths that are discovered in the solar system by hominids and humans. I'm reading straight off of Wikipedia right now. The response of these characters to their discovery drives the plot of the series. It also influences the fictional history of the series, particularly by encouraging humankind to progress with technological development and space travel. So the reason why I mentioned the monolith in 2001, The Space Odyssey, is because if you kind of look at the picture of a monolith, it's like black and it's like kind of a rectangle a bit. I mean, it's more cube, but it reminded me of like a cell phone. And then I thought, wow, like I've always kind of felt that cell phones are, like, I'm sorry, this is my hill, I'm dying on this hill. I've always felt that cell phones are a result of of reverse engineered alien technology. And by alien, I mean extraterrestrial. I don't mean little green men. I just mean from other lands. And I'm leaning towards the mindset that these other lands are like future humans that have seeded space and have traveled back in time to our present and are now influencing our timeline the way I alluded to you influencing your own incarnation through the past and affecting change in the future. Why wouldn't that happen on the macro level? So I've always felt that because this is one thing that doesn't fit. Chairs have stayed chairs. Homes have stayed homes. Doors have stayed the same shape through time. In fact, they've gotten more simplified, actually. Clothes are becoming more simplified, but our technology are getting increasingly complex. And I've always felt that cell phones are like the proverbial monoliths that were mentioned in the focal point of the movie 2001 Space Odyssey. Anyway, something there to think about. A lot of things to think about. My favorite thing is giving you guys things to think about. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.